A civil servant in early 1800s England kept a private portfolio of watercolors illustrating the Book of Revelation. One image depicted the seven-headed dragon from chapter 12, the beast waiting to devour a newborn child. William Blake painted the creature as a muscular human back, golden-skinned, facing away from the viewer. The seven heads appear as dark, shadowy crests extending from the neck and shoulders, less distinct faces than visual coronations of destructive authority. A tail coils around the figure's own legs before sweeping downward to wrap the woman compressed at the bottom of the frame. Blake painted the moment before infanticide, and he positioned the viewer exactly where the predator stands, forced to see the victim over the monster's shoulder. Blake's watercolor illustrates Revelation 12:1-4. A great red dragon stood before the woman who was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. No battle occurs. No angels intervene. Blake froze the instant before violence, the moment of predatory waiting. The woman lies back, positioned on a crescent moon looking upward. The dragon hovers above her, positioned to strike when the child emerges. Blake transformed apocalyptic scripture into a stalker scenario. The dragon isn't hunting, he's waiting. The painting captures anticipation, not action, the psychological space where threat becomes terror. Thomas Butts, a civil servant, commissioned this work for his private portfolio between 1803 and 1805. Because it stayed private rather than facing Royal Academy censors, Blake had freedom to visualize what institutional Christianity considered unpaintable, the physical reality of scriptural horror without softening or allegory. England was gripped by apocalyptic anxiety during these years. The Napoleonic Wars fueled fears that biblical end times had begun. Many viewed Napoleon as the Antichrist or beast of Revelation. Blake worked within this atmosphere but against the age of reason, opposing Enlightenment rationalism and believing science blinded humanity to spiritual reality. This dragon is Blake's spiritual counterattack, forcing viewers to confront a reality that is supernatural, violent, and non-rational. Blake painted the dragon from behind. Viewers see a hypermuscular human back and buttocks, the massive V shape of shoulders, the trapezius muscles rendered with exaggerated anatomical precision. The anatomy references Michelangelo's classical ideal, particularly the Belvedere torso, but inverted. Art historian David Bindman notes that Blake draws heavily on that classical muscularity, but twists it monstrously. This suggests evil is not a weak, flimsy demon, but a beautiful, powerfully corrupted thing. To see the woman, viewers must look over the dragon's shoulder. Blake made complicity unavoidable through spatial positioning. You're not watching from a safe distance. You're standing where the predator stands, seeing what he sees. This is the true crime hook. The dragon is a predator, and by showing his back, Blake forces the viewer into the position of looking over the perpetrator's shoulder at the victim, fostering complicity and dread. The woman remains visible but unreachable. Her hair flows downward, merging with sun rays at the bottom of the frame. She is clothed with the sun, positioned on the crescent moon beneath her feet. Her hands clasp in prayer or terror. Viewers, locked into the dragon's perspective, can only witness. Blake positioned the scariest vantage point not beside the victim, but behind the perpetrator, forced to see through his eyes. This alignment generates guilt and helplessness in equal measure. Blake intended the terrifying effect to depict a force innately human. The dragon's wings are webbed and ribbed like a bat's, not feathered like angelic wings. In 18th century visual language, bats signaled the demonic. The sharp, jagged wing points contrast with the woman's flowing circular lines, creating a visual war between aggression, sharp, and grace, curved. The wings span the entire frame width, eliminating any visual escape route. The tail demands attention. It doesn't simply hang or curl decoratively. It coils with serpentine precision around the dragon's own legs before extending downward. The tail sweeps across a third of the stars in the composition, a visual representation of Revelation's description of the dragon's tail dragging down a third of heaven's stars. Then it wraps the woman's lower body, covering her crescent moon. The tail's placement communicates sexual dominance and binding. Art historians identify this as Blake's deliberate attempt to visualize the destructive, oppressive nature of physical lust and dominion, a theme common in his prophetic works. The dragon's dominance over the woman's lower body signifies the usurpation of her natural, feminine, and spiritual power by brutal male aggression. The tail functions as a literal binding agent and a phallic symbol. The composition becomes an image of sexual and spiritual assault, the woman physically restrained by the predator positioned above her. The dragon's arms are deliberately obscured, folded within the massive wings. The threat is not invisible violence. No brandished claws, no grasping gestures. The terror comes from absolute, overwhelming mass and posture. His mere presence is the danger. The painting measures approximately 43.7 centimeters by 34.8 centimeters, smaller than most modern tablets. Yet it feels monumental. Blake achieved this through deliberate destruction of spatial orientation. Renaissance perspective systems rely on background elements to establish scale and distance. A figure placed against a landscape or architectural elements gives viewers reference points. The eye calculates size relationships automatically. Blake eliminated every reference point. No landscape, no architecture, no horizon line. There is virtually no background or depth of field. The dragon appears to be bursting out of the page while simultaneously filling an infinite void. The dragon occupies roughly 80% of the visual space. The woman is compressed into the bottom 20%, almost horizontal, suffocated by his bulk. Blake didn't just make her smaller. He trapped her in a confined portion of the composition while allowing the dragon to dominate. This distribution of visual weight creates intense claustrophobia and highlights her passivity as the dragon waits for the opportune moment of birth. Without depth cues, the dragon becomes infinite. He fills whatever space the viewer's mind attempts to construct around him. The ambiguity makes him everywhere, not bounded by the frame's edges, but extending beyond them. This use of composition creates what scholars call the sublime, the terrifying pleasure derived from confronting overwhelming power and scale. The dragon is massive yet inescapable. The small physical scale creates a different kind of trap. Large paintings allow emotional distance. Viewers can step back, observe from across a gallery, but a laptop-sized watercolor demands proximity. To see the detail, the ribbed texture of the wings, the woman's clasped hands, the crescent moon beneath her, viewers must lean in. Blake converted a devotional image into something that demands uncomfortable proximity. The viewer occupies the same confined psychological space as the woman, trapped by a compositional structure that allows no escape, no background retreat, no spatial refuge. William Blake intended the dragon's skin to glow gold with its muscles exaggerated, referencing Michelangelo's Belvedere torso, but twisted. The dragon is aesthetically magnificent. Viewers experience attraction before they process horror. Blake's theology complicates this response. In his earlier work, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell, he declared that energy is eternal delight. Blake didn't view energy as inherently moral or immoral. He saw it as a primal, essential force. Energy could create or destroy, liberate or dominate. But in this painting, that energy has become monstrous, predatory, and ego-driven. The dragon embodies what Blake called the corruption of pure spiritual power, energy that has fallen into materialism and ego. In Blake's personal mythology, the dragon represents Satan as the accuser of sin, a tragic figure of immense power now focused on a single predatory goal. The golden body shows what happens when energy divorces itself from empathy and turns solely toward domination. Standard Christianity in Blake's era viewed the dragon of Revelation purely as Satan, absolute evil, the enemy of God. Blake's relationship with the dragon was more complex. He understood the seductive quality of raw power. Gold signifies divine energy in religious iconography, the color of halos, of heavenly light, of sacred presence. Blake used that same gold to coat his predator. This creates disturbing beauty. The dragon looks like he should be worshipped. His form suggests transcendence, the muscular perfection, the wings spread wide, the luminous skin. Viewers experience cognitive dissonance, attraction to what should repel them, aesthetic pleasure in what threatens destruction. Blake understood that evil doesn't always appear monstrous. Sometimes it appears glorious. The seduction before revulsion pattern mirrors how charismatic predators operate. They attract through appearance, through confidence, through the appearance of power that looks like strength rather than violence. The attack comes after the lure. Blake painted the dragon beautiful because that's how predatory power works. It doesn't announce itself as a threat. It presents itself as something worthy of admiration. The dragon's arms are deliberately obscured, folded within the massive bat wings. The threat is not invisible violence, no brandished claws, no grasping gestures. The terror comes from absolute, overwhelming mass and posture. His mere presence is the danger. He is an irresistible, implacable force. Blake painted energy corrupted by ego, power that has become conscious of itself and chosen domination as its expression. In Thomas Harris's 1981 novel, Red Dragon, serial killer Francis Dollarhide becomes obsessed with Blake's painting. He tattoos the entire image across his back, transforming his own body into a canvas for Blake's vision. Late in the novel, Dollarhide steals the painting from a museum and consumes it, literally tears it apart and eats it to absorb what he believes is its transformative power. Dollarhide is obsessively identified with this specific painting, believing he must become the dragon to escape his weak humanity. He suffered severe childhood abuse that left him with profound self-loathing. The dragon offered him a different narrative, powerful, dominant, beyond human vulnerability. He called this process becoming the dragon. Harris correctly identified the painting's seductive trap. Blake painted a monster that looks like an apotheosis. The visual language suggests ascension, wings spread, body luminous, form perfected. Dollarhide fell for exactly what Blake warned against, mistaking predatory energy for spiritual power, confusing domination for strength, believing that violence could be the path to wholeness. The dragon displays the mask of sanity, the appearance of control and purposeful action that conceals violent intent. The patient waiting, the calculated positioning, the overwhelming presence. These aren't the behaviors of a mindless beast. They're the behaviors of an intelligent predator who understands exactly what he's doing. Harris, writing 176 years after Blake created this image, built an entire character's pathology around it. The modern interpretation shifts the dragon from a purely theological foe to a psychological phenomenon. Obsession, transformation, psychosis. The painting functions as a case study that remains forensically precise across centuries because Blake captured something fundamental about how corrupted power operates and how damaged people might confuse that corruption with salvation. Blake claimed he saw spiritual entities with his physical eyes. In his own words, "I see everything I paint in this world, but everybody does not see alike." Blake described himself as seeing these figures literally, claiming the spiritual world was his only real subject. This dragon is the record of a terrifying, self-professed vision. This is the key narrative tension. Is this divine inspiration or a descent into madness? When Blake held a public exhibition in 1809, critics called him an unfortunate lunatic. Religious imagery in Blake's era was meant to uplift viewers, to provide spiritual consolation. Blake's visions did the opposite. They oppressed, they disturbed, they confronted viewers with the physical reality of spiritual terror. Because the work was a private commission, it was shielded from public condemnation. Had it been shown publicly, its nude, overtly violent nature would have risked being labeled seditious or blasphemous. The dragon wears crowns, depicting a crowned king as a predator during the reign of Mad King George III, or the rise of Napoleon bordered on dangerous political commentary. Blake faced the challenge of visually rendering an entity described with impossible features. 7 heads, 10 horns, a vast tail sweeping stars from heaven. His solution was to humanize the monster's core. The 7 heads don't appear as a cartoonish hydra, but as dark, shadowy crests extending from the neck and shoulders, abstracted power rather than literal multiplicity. Blake shows the human form possessed by the power of the beast, making the horror intensely relatable and psychological. The question of Blake's mental state, mystic or madman, remains unresolved. What's documented is the precision of his visual testimony. Whether he accessed spiritual reality or experienced vivid hallucinations, he produced an image that captures predatory psychology with accuracy that holds up under modern scrutiny.